الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم رب جبرائيل وميكائيل وإسرافيل فاطر السماوات والأرض عالم الغيب والشهادة أنت تحكم بين عبادك فيما كانوا فيه يختلفون فاهدنا لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. رب يسر وأعن يا كريم. So welcome to the webinar, the first webinar of Sirat Seminary, Ramadan of the Pious, in which inshallah ta'ala we hope to go through various ahkam related to fasting, as well as a brief, very, very brief glimpse into the asrar as-sawm, or the secrets of fasting, or the inner dimensions of fasting, as laid out by Hujjatu'l Islam Abu Hamid al-Ghazzali, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his magnum opus, his book Ihya Ulum, and we'll come to that in a minute, inshallah ta'ala. Now, where we are right now in the global situation with COVID-19, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure the Muslims, if any of them have passed away, to have mercy on them and to give all of the Muslims good health, and to have mercy on the Muslims, those who are alive and those who have passed away as well. Allahumma ameen. We're in really an unprecedented time. There is a global lockdown, a global quarantine. It is very likely, with all the masajid shut as they are now, it's very likely as well that they will remain shut. I think the UK extended it for another 3 weeks. Possibly most parts of the world are similar to that. I know that there's still a partial quarantine or a partial lockdown in many Muslim countries. So therefore, certain things will be lacking. Certain things that we are used to in Ramadan will be lacking this Ramadan. For example, number one, first and foremost, the masajid. So the masajid generally won't be accessible. The community spirit, the community cohesion that we're used to experiencing in Ramadan will not be there anymore. The brotherhood that we're used to bonding with, especially in days for i'tikaf. For those of us who are fortunate to do i'tikaf, then the last 10 days, subhanAllah, it's a time where, and some of us do i'tikaf for more than that, but it's a time where we are, we come close to those members in our community, those members who are not from our community, whether it's the iftar, going to the masajid early, taking our children, experiencing the spirit of Ramadan. Okay, the spirit of Ramadan, it won't be accessible this year, unfortunately. However, that being said, this shouldn't cause us to then become disillusioned or disheartened, I should say. It shouldn't cause us to lose hope. Why? Because the believer, the mu'min, is ever hopeful in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The believer is ever hopeful in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that, as the Nabi sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith of Suhaib in Muslim, Imam Ahmad and Tirmidhi and others, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ خَيْرٌ, strange and wonderful. The word ajaban is an expression of ajab. Ajab means amazement. Something that is wonderful, something that is exciting, something that is strange in a good way, not in a negative way. So it has all of these positive connotations associated with this word ajaban. And then he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, strange and wonderful and amazing is the affair of the believer. His whole affair is good for him. Inna amruhu kullahu khair. His whole affair is good for him, and that is only for the believer. And then he goes on to say, فَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاء sabr. If something that he deems as negative and harmful befalls him, then he has patience upon that. Patience, seeking the countenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that sabr. Okay? When asabatu sarra, but if something good, positive on the other hand, that he deems positive befalls him, okay? Shakar, then he is in a state, a maqam of gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's ajib, subhanAllah, really. Well, as the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, it really is ajib. It is amazing. The affair of the believer is always positive. Always positive. And what we may deem as something negative, and of course, this is going into qada al-qadr, predestination, okay? And that is for those who are students in the Alamiyya program. We will deal with that, inshallah, next week and the weeks remaining in this particular term, because we'll be going through the book Usul al-Sunnah of Imam Ahmed. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to Allah Jalla wa Ala in one of his invocations and supplications to him, وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ, that evil is not attributed to you. So what we perceive as bad and evil for us, in reality, for the believer, it is something good, because Allah has infinite wisdom. And of course, the problem of good and evil is a question, I should say, that has been, there's been a lot of back and forth for centuries. But alhamdulillah, the Qawa'id of Ahl Sunnah in understanding this, or the principles of Ahl Sunnah in understanding this, is definitely the most robust, and it is closest to the wahi, and it is inshallah the safest. So coming back to it, the affair of the believer is ever good, is ever good. That being said, to make the most of this Ramadan, brothers and sisters, what you put in is what you will get out of it. What you put in it is what you will get out. So the effort that you make to make this Ramadan special, you will find that throughout and at the end of Ramadan. So just to kind of make this a little bit tangible, okay? So it's not just something abstract, but for those of us who like tangible ideas, tangible things, let's deal with it like this. Every single one of us here has one or two or maybe more things that they find special in Ramadan. It could be the things I mentioned of the brotherhood, the masajid, and so on and so forth. When you identify what that thing is that you find special, it could be Taraweeh, it could be standing in prayer, it could be reading Quran, okay, it could be certain adhkar or ad'iyah supplications that one does, or other types of ibadat, whatever it may be. It's important that we identify it, and after we identify it, it's important that we try to recreate that in our homes as best as we can. Excuse me, as best as we can. So for example, just for an example, many of us were accustomed to, after, in speaking from a pure London context, we may have brothers and sisters who are different parts of the world, but generally in London, when we break, just before the time of iftar, it is also the time in which the Taraweeh prayers will be live streaming in Mecca and Medina. So many of us, we put the TV on or the computer, whatever we may have, and we just listen to that. Okay, and it's something that my family used to do when I was young. And for me, subhanAllah, Ramadan became associated with that, because for the whole year, generally, I will not see the salawat. This is when I was young, I will not see the salawat. But Ramadan, I used to, hear the salawat, see it, read the translations, and I would feel, wow, then I would go to the prayers myself. So for me, that was something that I used to personally enjoy, and that would contribute to the Ramadan spirit. Because brothers, wallahi, we're emotional creatures, okay? And our emotions, they generally can't distinguish between what's real and what's not, okay? And this is something that psychologists, and this is going into the realm of psychology, but emotions generally can't distinguish what's real and what's not, okay? Which is why if our emotions may act a certain way, but our intellect or rationality or rational will deem that, wait a minute, it shouldn't be acting that way, but why do I feel this way? Okay, so whatever that thing may be, for example, if it's what I mentioned, then put the live stream on, for example. Inshallah, it should be playing this year. If it's not, and it should be, but if it's not, then at least you have the previous net. Yes, put that on just before iftar. So at least you can try to recreate that. If it's Taraweeh, then try your utmost to pray Taraweeh at home, as every single one of us should be doing, inshallah ta'ala. If it's other things, like, for example, you're used to certain tilawa, then listen to that tilawa. Listen to that tilawa and try your best to recreate that in your own space, bi'idhnillah. Okay? If it's problems, on the other hand, that may give rise to our anxiety, then let's try and deal with that and minimize it. For example, standing Tarawih prayers, many of us are not hufaz. Hold the masahif, or place it in a certain place that you can see in salah. This is something many of the ulama, of the fuqaha, the scholars of jurisprudence and fiqh have allowed, and they've allowed to do this. So let us take this concession in Tarawih, especially considering the circumstances that we are. The final thing, brothers and sisters, before we move on to the main part of the webinar, is that little things that we are consistent upon will yield the greatest benefits and the greatest fruits. You see, Ramadan, as most ibadat, it is not about the kam, or it's not about how big an action is, but it's about consistency, and it's about sincerity. Consistency and sincerity. Abdullah Mubarak rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya anhu, he mentioned that, he said, رُبَّمَا النِّيَّةُ تُصَغِّرُهُ الْعَمَلِ الْعَظِيمِ. He said that it could be one's intentions would render a great, magnificent action, an action of worship, will render it into something very small, simply because of a person's intention. Was it really to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And likewise, vice versa. A person's intention can render what would generally be deemed as a small act of ibadah, okay? A person's intention will render that into something azim, something great. So little things consistency and sincerity will be the greatest reward. Look, for example, in the news, what happened recently with the pensioner. He completed, I think, 99 laps or 100 laps, and he raised over 20 million pounds. 20 million pounds. But it's constant. If you see him, yeah, and he's subhanAllah, literally one step at a time, one step at a time. But he raised over 20 million pounds for the NHS. So it's little things, but consistency will lead the greatest rewards. It's as if this is a sunnah kuni of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah Jalla wa ala knows best. That being said, so we'll go on now to the Kitab Asrar As-Sawm, or the Secrets of Fasting, by Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazzali rahimahullahu ta'ala. Now, a brief introduction to who al-Ghazzali was. Al-Ghazali or al-Ghazzali with a shadda on the za, depends. My Sheikh Abdul Karim Khudair, he would say that this is the strongest way of pronouncing the name of al-Ghazali with a shadda on the za. But now, he was one of the greatest experts of Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic theology, and other sciences as well. He was one of the foremost at his time, and indeed many years and centuries after him, even until today, he is still revered. It could be said that the most influential figures that we have in our history are three, irrespective of whether we agree with their stances or not. Yani, and I say that because one of them was Ibn Arabi al-Ta'i, a-Sufi, okay? And he's a very polarizing, controversial figure, okay? Many of the fuqaha excommunicate him from Islam across the madhahib, yani, across many of the Ahnaf, the Malikiya, Shafi'iyya, Hanabila, so on and so forth. But yet he was very influential in terms of figures who were influential in terms of propagation of certain ideas and thoughts across the Islamic world. So Ibn Arabi was definitely one of them. But before him was Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala. And after al-Ghazali was Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Abu al-Abbas Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim Ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani, rahimahullah ta'ala. Okay, so these were very influential figures. And Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, was someone who mastered all of the Islamic sciences and the non-Islamic sciences of his time. And he summarized them into many different books and treatises and works. And he went through various stages in his life. Of course, he grew up in Tus, which is modern, Naysabur, which is modern day Iran, and he, in the northern part of Iran. And he learned the various sciences when he was young. He mastered them, and eventually he was renowned for his brilliance, and he became the head of a Nizamiyya. So Nizam al-Mulk, who was the vizier of the Seljuk Sultan, made him head of the Nizamiyya, which is a modern day college, if you want to refer to it as that. And he became, so at a very young age, he was literally the head of the Islamic Shu'un Islamiyya, or the Islamic affairs, and his books were the relied upon books at his time. So at his time, the books that he authored in fiqh and in usul were the books that was taught and studied across the whole Islamic world. However, a few years after this happened, and this is a pivotal moment in the life of al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, a few years after this happened, al-Ghazali fell into what could be termed as a spiritual crisis. And this is him talking about it himself. If you read his book, one of the last books he wrote, Al-Munqidh min al-Dhalal, Deliverance from Error. It's been translated by Montgomery Watt and a few other, I think there's a more modern translation as well. And it's literally like an autobiographical piece, and I advise everyone to read it, inshallah ta'ala. He fell into a spiritual crisis, and he left Baghdad, and he renounced his career, and he said to his family he's going to Hajj. He went to Hajj, and it took a few years to reach Hajj, which is quite standard. But after Hajj, he did not go back to his home. He went into isolation and seclusion, and he became the cleaner or the janitor of a masjid. And he remained there for over 10 years in a very obscure position. No one knew who he was. And he continued to spiritually rectify himself. And he mentions that he tried his best to gain certainty after mastering all of these sciences, but he could not gain certainty until eventually he delved into what he termed as tasawwuf. And of course, this term of tasawwuf, it's a very polarizing term. For a lot of us, we may think, oh, subhanAllah, la, but la, the reality is, tasawwuf literally means, and there's qaida amongst the usuli, a principle amongst the usuli, la mushahata fil istilah, that there's no, there's essentially a lot of leeway when it comes to technical definitions. Okay, so you can term it tasawwuf, you can term it tazkiyah, you can term it tarbiyah, whatever you want to term it as, it comes back to rectifying the inner soul, rectifying the heart. And he said that he found only through tasawwur, only through spiritual rectification and islah did he find he could reach to certainty with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after mastering all of the sciences. So yani, from that we can understand that logical argumentation, it can only take you so far. Logical argumentation can only take you so far, whether it's logical argumentation of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or whatever it may be. And of course that's the pinnacle of Islamic theology. But it can only take you so far as to give you yaqeen. What will grant you yaqeen is your spiritual devotion to Allah, the connection that you have with Him Jalla wa Ala. So this is what al-Ghazali himself said. And after this 10 years, he finally came back and he wrote his magnum opus, Ihya Ulum al-Deen, which is the revival of the Islamic Sciences, which is the book that we'll be going through today, in particular one part of it, which is the secrets of fasting, the secrets of fasting. And after he came back, he began writing, as I said, Ihya Ulum and other books as well, until he passed away. May Allah shower His mercy upon him. As for the kitab Ihya Ulum al-Deen, now this is a kitab that again is cause for some controversy as well. There are a lot of scholars or ulama who are for the distribution, the reading of this kitab, and likewise there are equal amount of number who preferred that this book should not be read, and simply due to the amount of mistakes that are found in it. Okay, but I think it's important to be balanced in everything, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so whatever we approach, it's important that we have a balanced head on our shoulders and we try to ascertain the haqq in it. To summarize it, before I want to mention two statements, one from Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala talking about this book Ihya Ulum, and another from al-Dhahabi, Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, Shafi'i, the famous historian, talking about this kitab. But before I mention that, very simply, I do honestly believe that there's a lot of benefit in this book. There's a lot of benefit in this book. I don't believe that the original, for those of us who have access to the Arabic, as far as I know, it's not translated to English, I don't believe the original should be read by everyone. I think it should be read by only those who have a certain grounding in the Islamic sciences, not necessarily that he's an alim or a shaykh or whatever, but a minimal grounding in aqidah in particular. After that, a person can read this book and benefit from it. In terms of the summarized versions that are available, for example, today we'll be reading from the summarized version of Kitab al-Siyam, of the Secrets of Fasting, by Sheikh Salih al-Shami, who's a well-known muhaddith, mashallah, tabarakallah. There are others as well. For example, you have Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin by Abu Abdullah ibn Qudama, translated to English as well. You can read from that as well. So what they did, they not only summarized it, but they did tahdib of it, meaning they removed what was otherwise deemed as many ahadith that are mawdu'a, many ahadith that are fabricated, as well as a few things that are in contradiction to general orthodox principles in theology. So the summarized version of Sheikh Salih al-Shami is available online, and you can buy it as well. It's been translated, and I advise we all buy that, inshallah, and benefit from it, because Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin has also been translated, and it can be purchased. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he said regarding this book, Ihya Ulum al-Deen, the revival of the Islamic sciences, he says, وَالْإِحْيَا فِيهِ فَوَائِدْ كَثِيرًا. He mentions, now pay attention, he mentions that there are many benefits in the book of al-Ghazzali, Ihya Ulum al-Deen, the revival of the Islamic sciences. There are many benefits in it. لكن, however, فِيهِ مواد مذمومة. There are certain things that are not so beneficial. So again, he is very balanced, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. And of course, Ibn Taymiyyah is a character, not only one of the most influential figures, as I mentioned previously, but he's a person, as one of my Mashayikh, Abdullah al-Bariqi, the Usuli in Medina, he said that Shaykh al-Islam has not been read as he should have been read. And when he said this, subhanAllah, it resonated with me many years ago, and it resonates with me until today. Ibn Taymiyyah is not a person who has been read. He is a figure who has been hijacked. SubhanAllah, you'll find you'll find the extreme jihadi takfiri groups, they've hijacked Ibn Taymiyyah. You'll find SubhanAllah, even some Sufis, they've hijacked Ibn Taymiyyah as well. Yeah, you find every group has hijacked him for what, but he is someone who has not been read as he's been read. You find that he says, there are many beneficial things in it. However, there are things that are not so beneficial as well. And he mentions such as the kalam of the philosopher, the theological reasonings of the philosophers that are connected to Tawheed and prophethood and the return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he mentions after this, he says, وَقَالُوا مرضه الشفاء. He mentions that many of the ulama have said that the problem that remained in Ghazali was that the book that he delved into, okay, and he read and he wrote about, it was a book by the name of Al-Shifa. Al-Shifa was a book, and it's still available today, written by Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina, or as he's known in the Western Hemisphere, Avicenna. Okay, this book was the theological reasonings of Ibn Sina in falsafa or philosophy. It's what's termed as Islamic philosophy. Okay, so he says that many of the ulama, what he found in it, it impacted him so deeply that he cannot escape from it. Okay, now Ibn Sina, we don't want to divert and go into Ibn Sina and talk about, for example, the contingency argument and other things that he came up with. Certain things are not necessarily rejected simply because they've come from Ibn Sina, but there are other things in that kitab which are very, very problematic. And let's not forget that Ibn Sina, al-Ghazali himself made takfir of Ibn Sina. You'll find it in the book that I mentioned, Deliverance from Error, Munqidh min al-Dalal. Ghazali makes takfir Ibn Sina on 3 different things. One of them is the fact that Ibn Sina said that Allah does not know the particulars. He only knows the universals of what happens in the creation. So essentially he's ascribed ignorance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He also rejected he also claimed that the world is pre-eternal as well, meaning coexisting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, independent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and other things. And finally, he just basically, essentially, he says, and simply because of what he mentioned, this is why the ijtihadat, or the independent legal reasonings of the ulama in regards to this kitab, this is why they differed. Al-Dhahabi, on the other hand, he says in Sir Alam al-Nubala, in his biography of al-Ghazali, he mentions أما الإحياء, as for the book إحياء علوم الدين, ففيه من الأحاديث الباطلة جملة. He says that generally there are many ahadith that are باطلة meaning baseless ahadith. Okay, وفيه خير كثير, but yet there is a lot of خير, a lot of goodness in the kitab. لولا ما فيه من آداب ورسوم وزهد من طرائق الحكماء ومنحرف الصوفية نسأل الله تعالى علما نافعا. He says there is so much goodness in the kitab, if it were not for the fact that yet there are so many other things in it from the heretics, essentially, basically was what he refers to as the heretics from the Safiyyah and other than them. So unfortunately, the kitab, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of khair in it, alhamdulillah. There's also a lot of problems in it as well, that generally, unless you have a ta'seenus in the Islamic sciences, you won't generally be able to distinguish between it, which is why I advise reading the summarized version by Sheikh Salih al-Shami if one were to read it. I don't know, that would be interesting enough. He goes on to talk about ilman. He asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for beneficial knowledge. And then he says, Atidri ma ilmun nafi. He says, do you know what al-ilmun nafi is? And then he just goes into such a beautiful prose, a beautiful explanation of what beneficial knowledge is. And he says, Huwa ma nazal bihi al-Quran. It is what the Quran has revealed, and that which the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has interpreted and explained in his speech and his action, and he has not prohibited it. قال عليه السلام من رغم عن سنتي فليس مني. Whoever goes against my sunnah, then he is not from me. فعليك يا أخي بتدبر كتاب الله. Then al-Dhahabi addresses us, and he addresses the reader, and he says, ponder much over the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look constantly of the hadith that are present in the Sahihain, in the Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, likewise Sunan Nisa'i, likewise Riyadh al-Salihin by Imam al-Nawawi, and the Kitab al-Adhkar, the book of remembrance by also al-Hafidh al-Nawawi as well. Tuflih wa tanja. He says you'll be successful, and you will succeed. And he says, وَإِيَّاكَ وَأَرَاءُ عِبَادِ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ. He says avoid the speech and the theological reasonings of the Ubad al-Falasifa, literally the Islamic philosophers. وظائف أهل الرياضيات وجوء الرهبان. It just talks about basically those who are classified as heretics, from the extreme Sufis and so on and so forth. He says, for كل الخير, all types of goodness are present in following al-Hanafiyyah as-Samha, in following the pure monotheistic religion of Islam as understood by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba. And then he finally asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the straight path, and we ask Allah to guide us to the straight path. So moving on, inshallah ta'ala, al-Ghazali, he says at the beginning of this, it's the book Asrar al-Sawm. He says in this chapter, now if you look at the original, okay, al-Ghazali, in the original book of Secrets of Fasting, he mentions a brief introduction, okay? And then in this introduction, he mentions 7 ayat and 13 hadith, 13 hadith. And then he mentions 3 different sub-chapters. The first is the outward secrets of fasting. And this essentially is a very brief overview of the fiqh of fasting, okay? A very brief overview of the fiqh of fasting. But then he mentions the inward or inner dimensions or inner secrets of fasting. And this is what we're going to focus on today, inshallah ta'ala. And then finally, he mentions the different types of optional fasts, and he speaks about that. So he says here, and so inshallah, what I'll do, I'll read it verbatim and translate it and comment on it, inshallah. He says, الصوم متميز بخاصية النسبة إلى الله تعالى من بين سائر الأركان. He mentions that fasting is unique in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes it to himself, whereas he has not attributed it any other act of worship to himself apart from fasting. Because he mentioned in Hadith Qudsi, كل حسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف. He mentions in Hadith Qudsi that Allah said every good deed is equivalent to 10 more of it, up to 700 more. So the reward of it is up to 10 or even past that, up to 700 times. إلا الصيام, except for fasting. فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به, because it is done for me and my sake, and I will reward for it, subhanallah, even past 700. So that one fast, not only would it be multiplied up to 10 times, not only would it be multiplied up to 700 times, but even more than that. And Allah attributed him to himself. And he mentions, وَنَاهِيكَ فِي مَعْرِفَةِ فَضْلِهِ قَوْلُهُ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He mentions that it's enough for you to know the qualities or the benefits or the excellence of fasting. The fact that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَخَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. He said, by the one whom my soul is in his hand, the smell that emanates from a fasting person's mouth is more beloved to Allah than misk. Allahu Akbar. It is more beloved to Allah than the smell or the scent of misk. Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَذَرُ شَهْوَتَهُ وَطَعَامُهُ شَرَابُهُ لِأَجْلِي. This person who fasts, he leaves off eating, drinking, and his innate carnal desires for me and my sake alone. فَصَوْمُ لِي وَأَنَا جَزِي بِهِ. And the Hadith Qudsi concludes by Allah saying, and so fasting, it is done for me and my sake, and I will reward for it. I will reward for it. Allahu Akbar. It's interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Haqqa, كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا هَنِيئًا بِمَا أَسْلَفْتُمْ فِي الْأَيَّامِ الْخَالِيَةِ. Allah says, eat and drink in, however you like, as you have eaten and drinking كما أسلفتم الأيام الخالية, as you've sent forth in the days that have gone. As you've sent forth in the days that have gone. Waqi' ibn Jarrah, he comments on this ayah. And he says the days that have gone past are the days of fasting, because in those days the fasting people, they left eating and drinking for the sake of Allah, and so Allah will reward them with this in an infinitely beautiful way in Jannah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Jannah. After this, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, للجنة باب يقال له الريان. In Jannah there is a bab, a door. It is said that its name is Rayyan, al-Rayyan. لا يدخله إلا الصائمون. It has been reserved for the fasting people. Those who used to fast in this dunya, only they will enter it. He also says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, للصائم فرحتان. The fasting person has two, Allahu Akbar, has two moments of joy. And happiness. The first of them, فرحة عند إفطاره. The first of them is when he breaks his fast. Of course, it's a joyous moment for all of us. We have experienced this. And the second of them is فرحة عند لقاء ربه. It is when he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is when he meets his Lord Jalla wa ala. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to meet him Jalla wa ala. He also says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إذا دخل شهر رمضان, when the month of Ramadan enters, فتحت أبواب الجنة. The doors of Jannah will be opened. وغلقت أبواب النار, and the doors of the fire will be closed. وصفدت الشياطين, and the shayateen will be entrenched and shackled. And the hadith actually continues. It stops here, but the hadith continues. ونادى مناد, and a caller will call out, يا باغي الخير أقبل. O one who seeks goodness, now it is your time. Now it is your time to act. Now it is your time to worship Allah. Now it is your time to get closer to Him, Jalla wa ala. And likewise, وَيَا بَاغِيَ الشَّرِّ أَقْصِرْ. And as for the one who seeks evil, then stay where you are and be detested. SubhanAllah, the month of Ramadan, ya ikhwa, it is a time when the shayateen are locked up. Of course, there's interpretation amongst the ulama as to which shayateen are locked up. Is it only the afarit or the great shayateen that are locked up, and the minor ones, are they still free to roam? Or is it all of them incomplete? But one thing that there's unanimous agreement on is that the waswas of shaitan is definitely less in Ramadan. SubhanAllah. So if you find that we are still inclined to do acts of haram, acts of fahsha, munkarat, despicable things and sins and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan, then know that is from ourselves. And we cannot now blame shaitan for it. We cannot now say, shaitan has a look on me, or shaitan, influences me. La, it is from yourself. It is from yourself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to fight our inner nafs. He then mentions جزاء الصائم لا يدخل تحت وهم وتقدير. He mentions that the reward of the fasting person, after mentioning these hadith, he said the reward of the fasting person, it is no longer held and bound in the realm of understanding or comprehension. Meaning the reward of the fasting person, it is beyond the realm of our understanding. It is beyond the realm of our faculties. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Allah says that those who have patience, they will be rewarded without account. They will be rewarded without account. Okay? Interesting enough, in a hadith in Tirmidhi, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, الصَّوْمُ نِصْفُ الصَّبْرِ. Fasting is half of patience. And in a narration which is mawquf to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, that patience is half of iman. As-sabru nisful iman. Patience is half of iman. Subhanallah. So you could say that fasting could be a quarter of iman, and therefore it is beyond the realm of comprehension and understanding. He says, وَجَدِيرٌ بِأَن يَكُونَ كَذَلِكَ. And it should be like this. Why? It should be beyond the realm of our comprehension and understanding, and the reward of it should be like that as well. Because the fast, because fasting is done for his sake alone. وَمُشَرَّفًا بِالنِّسْبَةِ إِلَيْهِ. And likewise, it is honored the fact that Allah has attributed it to Himself. وَإِن كَانَتْ الْعِبَادَاتُ كُلُّهَا لَهُ. And even if all of the acts of ibadat, they are all for Him, Jalla wa ala. They're all attributed to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as the Kaaba has been attributed to Him. So we say Baytullah, the house of Allah. So likewise, that is a form of honoring for the Kaaba. It's attributed to its maker, Jalla wa ala. وَالْأَرْضُ كُلُّهُ لَهُ لِمَعْنَيَيْنِ. But he mentions there are two main reasons for this. Okay, there are two main reasons in fasting being attributed to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first is that he says, as-sawm kaffun wa tark. He says that within fasting, there is kaffun and there is tark. Literally, there is restraint. There is restraint, and within fasting, one of the meanings is that it is a type of restraint in which actions are left off. He says, وَهُوَ فِي نَفْسِهِ سِرٌّ لَيْسَ فِيهِ عَمَلٌ يُشَاهِدُ. And likewise, in the innate essence of fasting, there is nothing that is outwardly exhibited by a fasting person. It's not like he's praying salah. You can see a person that prays, or a person that gives sadaqah or zakat, or any other act of ibadah, hajj. You can see it. The ihram is worn, and the travel, the journey is taken, and so on and so forth. Or even adhkar, you can see a person's mouth moves. But fasting, there is nothing that is witnessed. It's an internal action. And what defines fasting is that it is tark. It is literally you are not doing something, but you're leaving, you're abstaining from something. وَجَمِيعُ عَمَالِ طَاعَاتِ بِمَشْهَدِ الْخَلْقِ وَمَرْأً. He says that all of the other acts of worship towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acts of obedience, they can be witnessed. وَالصَّوْمُ لَا يَرَاهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. But as for fasting, none can see it except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ فِي الْبَاطِنِ بِالصَّبْرِ الْمُجَرَّدِ. Because it is an action that is comprised of pure patience. Pure patience. And of course, this patience stems from abstinence. وَالثَّانِي, and the second meaning, أَنَّهُ قَهْرٌ لِعَدُوِّ اللَّهِ. The second meaning is that it is literally obliterating the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. of course, it's referring to shaitan. How? Because he says, فَإِنَّ وَسِيلَةَ الشَّيْطَانِ لَعْنَهُ اللَّهُ الشَّهَوَاتِ. The means that shaitan uses, okay, to misguide the people, it is by way of one's desires. By way of one's desires. وَإِنَّمَا تَقْوَى الشَّهَوَاتِ بِالْأَكْلِ وَالشُّرْبِ. And desires, and this is very interesting, desires are strengthened by eating and drinking. Okay, so if one is excessive in this, then likewise his shahawat will also be strengthened. فَلَمَّا كَانَ الصَّوْمُ عَلَى الْخُصُوصِ قَمْعًا لِلشَّيْطَانِ. And he mentions because fasting in essence, and in particular, it is a way of literally rendering useless shaitan. Qam'an literally means to destroy, okay? Qam' to destroy something, right? If someone, to literally destroy shaitan, وَسَدًّا لِمَسَالِكِهِ, and it is a means to stop shaitan from progressing. It's like placing a barrier, a shield, as we'll come to know in a minute, inshallah, like a shield stopping shaitan from attacking you. وَتَضْيِيقًا لِمَجَارِيهِ, and likewise, it constricts the pathways of shaitan. We know from the hadith, which is muttafaqun alayhi, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was with Safiyyah, the mother of the believers, radiallahu anha, and it was at night time, and there were two of the Sahaba who were walking past. They saw this, and they quickly walked faster. But Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam called out to them and said, "Ala rislikuma," yani slow down. "Innaha la Safiyyah. This is Safiyyah who I am talking to." Meaning it is my wife who I'm talking to. It is not someone else. And of course they will, a'udhu billahi shaitan, ma'adha Allah, that we could ever think bad of you, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But then he said, "Inna shaitan yajri min ibn Adam majra dam." He said, shaitan flows in the blood of the sons of Adam. So fasting restricts this, and it restricts the movement of shaitan. Okay? Because of all of these reasons, he then goes on to say, "Istahaqqa takhsisu binisba ila Allah azza wa jal." Then because of these reasons, it is right, and rightly so, that fasting is then attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is essentially rendering null the efforts of shaitan. He says, فَمِنْ هَذَا الْوَجْهِ صَارَ الصَّوْمُ جُنَّةً. From this angle, fasting is a shield. Fasting is a shield from this angle. وَإِذَا عَظُمَتْ فَضِيلَتُهُ إِلَى هَذَا الْحَدِّ فَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ بَيَانِ شُرُوطِهِ. Then essentially he says, and if fasting is as has been mentioned, okay, in terms of his fada'il, in terms of his excellent qualities and attributes, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself used fasting for his creation, then he uses this as an introduction to say that because of this and the importance of it, we will go into mentioning the outward fiqh of fasting, and likewise the inner secrets, and so on and so forth. So we are going to skip the outward conditions, as he mentions, the conditions of fasting, which is the summarized fiqh, as I mentioned, because we are going to go through Kitab Siyam by Umdatul Talib al-Buhuti rahimahullah ta'ala. So if we go straight to al-Fasl al-Thani, you see that he says here, Asrar al-Sawm, okay, wa shurutuhu al-batinah. Okay, this is the most important chapter, brothers and sisters. He talks about the secrets of fasting and the inner conditions present that should be present in a person whilst he fasts. And he says, and this really is the highlight and what I really wanted to focus on from this. He says, "I'lam أن الصوم ثلاث درجات." He says, know that fasting is of 3 different types of darajat, or levels or categories. Okay, the first, he says, صوم العموم. It is the fast of the laity, the lay Muslims. Okay, this is not a derogatory term, billah, but it's the fast of the general Muslims and how they view fasting. Those who are not privy to the status of fasting that are sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or how the Salaf understood fasting. He says the second daraja is صوم الخصوص, fasting of the khusus, literally the special people. And finally, صوم خصوص الخصوص, the fast of the special from the special people. Okay, so it is literally the cream of the crop, essentially. Okay, he says, as for صوم العموم, as for the fast of the laity, the general lay Muslims, then it's very simple. كف البطن والفرج عن قضاء الشهوة كما سبق توصيل. To restrain the stomach and the private parts from that which they both desire, as has been aforementioned. Very simple definition of this. This is not to nullify this, ya ikhwa, or to lower its importance, because this is very important. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hadith Qudsi revolve around this as well. La, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. But there's also a higher level as well. And he says, وَأَمَّا صَوْمُ الْخُصُوص, as for the fast of the special people, فَهُوَ كَفُّ السَّمْعِ والبصر واللسان واليد والرجل وسائر الجوارح عن الآثام. He says that it is to restrain the hearing, okay, the sight, the tongue, the hands and the legs and the feet and the rest of the person's limbs from sins. So it isn't restricted only to the stomach and to the private parts, right? But it's the rest of the outward body that we possess, to restrict it from committing that which displeases him subhanahu wa ta'ala in a state of abstinence, in a state of fasting. So it is greater than this, okay? As for finally, he says, Sawmu khusus al-khusus, as for the fast of the special from the special, okay, the unique from the unique, the cream of the crop, he says, فَصَوْمُ الْقَلْبِ عَنِ الْهِمَمِ الدَّنِيَّةِ. Then Allahu Akbar. What is left, brothers and sisters? We've spoken about the outward limbs. What's left is inward, the inward heart. So it is fasting via the heart from the, he says, al-himam ad-daniyya, the lowly wants and aspirations and needs that a person desires from his heart. So it is placing abstinence internally now. He says, well, afkar ad-daniyya, his heart, his mind. So to remove these, lowly thoughts a person has. وَكَفُّهُ عَمَّا سِوَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ بِالْكُلِّيَّةِ. And it is to remove all of these lowly whims and desires and thoughts from a person's heart and mind, and to replace it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with thinking and pondering about him and remembering him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can see why he mentioned it as really kind of, bismillah. You can see why he referred to it as the fast of the special, subhanAllah, because this is something that really, it takes immense ijtihad, it takes immense exertion to be able to get onto to be able to kind of even perceive a level in which your inward thoughts are directed only at him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, he says here, وَيَحْصُلُ الْفِطْرُ فِي هَذَا الصَّوْمِ بِالْفِكْرِ فِي مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ, and fitr, or breaking of the fast, is achieved for these people by thinking about other than him subhanahu wa ta'ala and the final day. Okay, وَبِالْفِكْرِ فِي الدُّنْيا, likewise thinking about the dunya, إِلَّا دُنْيا تُرَادُ لِدِينِ, except for a dunya that is meant not for its sake in and of itself, but as a means to achieve the deen, as a means for the religion. So there's a ultimate further purpose behind this. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ زَادِ الْآخِرَةِ, because this is from the provisions of the akhirah, وَلَيْسَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا, and it's not from the dunya in and of itself. So he says here that, of course, thinking about other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if one thinks about the dunya, for example, then this dunya is meant only as a vehicle, only as a means to achieve a greater purpose, which is the dunya, which is the akhirah. Okay, which is the akhirah. And so if this greater purpose is achieved, then in fact this dunya now takes the ruling of that thing. Okay, so it takes the ruling of that thing. وهذه رتبة الأنبياء والصديقين والمقربين. He mentions here, subhanallah, that this is the level of the prophets and the siddiqeen, okay, and the muqarrabeen, those who are close with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who are truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reality is, ya ikhwa, it is easy to talk about this, okay? It is easy to talk about the fasting of the special, and so on and so forth. However, like most things in tazkiyah, like most things in tasawwuf as-sahih, it can only be achieved by great exertion, by great ijtihad. If there is no ijtihad and exertion in this, then it will simply remain ink on paper. Okay, we will never truly experience it. And to experience this, brothers and sisters, it takes jihad on nafs. It takes you to fight against your nafs. Okay, and this is what we want to achieve in this Ramadan, bi'idhnillah, because now, subhanAllah, most of us are in lockdown now. Okay, we are literally at home. It is a perfect, ample opportunity for us to focus on our inner self. Now, this type of khalwa, this type of seclusion, we subhanAllah, many people in their lifetime have not witnessed this on this scale. Wallahi, many people have not witnessed it, subhanAllah. Okay, so alhamdulillah, Allah Jalla wa ala, again, we see the optimism in all situations. If He allowed us to reach this time, alhamdulillah, and we ask Him to allow us to reach Ramadan next week, bi'idhnillah, Allahumma balighna Ramadan, then let us use this, let us try to persevere in this Ramadan, bi'idhnillah, and experience what al-Ghazzali, rahmatullah. Who amongst us does not want to experience this, ya akhwa? Who doesn't want, subhanahu, to be this close to Allah Jalla wa ala, where all of his inner thoughts are only directed at Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala? Who amongst us does not want this? We all want this, ya akhwa. We all want to be of these people. We all want to be near to the daraja of the prophets. And those under the prophets are not even the shuhada, brothers and sisters, but they are the siddiqoon. They are the siddiqoon. As is mentioned by many of the ulama, the siddiqoon are those who are the ulama, those who have knowledge. And it doesn't mean you have to reach a certain level of ilm. La. If a person knows, then he is an alim. If a person knows something, acts upon that thing, he is an alim. He is an alim. So if we know this, and we know the hadith, and we know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has referred to fasting as, then let us take that step forward. Let us set ourselves goals this Ramadan to allow us to achieve this, bi'idhnillah. And for those of us who haven't used Sha'ban as a springboard, and of course the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Salaf would use Sha'ban as a springboard, as a means of preparing themselves for Ramadan by way of fasting, by way of tilawah, increased recital of the Quran. There's still time left, alhamdulillah. Okay, there's still time left. Ramadan is only a few days away. Once Ramadan starts, brothers and sisters, let us have a very clear, productive schedule as to how we can maximize this time in Ramadan. As a means to start, I advise everyone to go to the website Productive Muslim. Okay, and there are a lot of free resources there. And mashallah, they are very good, very beneficial, alhamdulillah. And it's a good means to start. طيب. He then says, وَأَمَّا صَوْمُ الْخُصُوص, as for the fasting of the special people, right? So this is the one under خصوص and خصوص. This is under this. He says, وَهُوَ صَوْمُ الصَّالِحِينَ, and it is the fast of the pious people. And as he mentioned before, it is to abstain from the outward limbs, to abstain from the desires, and to abstain in totality from sinful things. He says, it can only be achieved, وَتَمَامُهُ بِسِتَّةِ أُمُورٍ, perfection of this fast. Okay, so that being said, it's interesting that he mentioned this now, because okay, the fast of the special, the fast of the inward faculties of our mind and our heart, it can only come, as I mentioned, with perseverance. It takes a long time of consistency and exertion to achieve this. It might be far for us. We aim for it, inshallah. We aim for that, inshallah. Okay, but at the same time, if we find it difficult, then at least every single one of us now in this webinar, we can achieve this one now. We can achieve the fast of the khusus, of the special people, the fast that is above the fast of the laity. And he says its perfection, its completeness is by 6 things. 6 things. If we do it, inshaAllah ta'ala, then we've achieved this level, bi'idhnillah. He says the first of them is ghaddul basar. It is to lower the gaze. It is to lower the gaze. وكفه عن الاتساع في النظر إلى كل ما يذم ويكره أو يذم ويكره, and it is to stop the eye, to restrict the eyes from looking at everything that is disliked, everything that is haram. وإلى كل ما يشغل أو يشغل القلب ويلهي عن ذكر الله عز وجل, and likewise to prevent it from looking at that which will divert it away from Allah. You know, Allahu Akbar, brothers and sisters, wallahi, we have to understand exactly what's happening here. Okay, subhanallah, al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, he doesn't just say stop looking at that which is, he doesn't even mention that which is haram, because that's a given. Say to the believers that they should lower their gaze. We don't look at that which is haram. It's khalas, it's given. And if we're struggling on that, Allah musta'an, this is the time to perfect this, inshallah. But he says we shouldn't even look at that which is disliked to look at. But then after this, he says we should lower our gaze from that which will distract us from Allah Jalla wa ala. Allahu Akbar. What would distract us from Allah, my brothers and sisters? The dunya. So if we find things tempting us in this dunya, even if it's not in haram means, ya ikhwa, but it's tempting us to invest our thoughts when really we're in a state of abstinence, okay, a state of fasting, then we should likewise lower our gaze from that. And I'll tell you a story that was mentioned to us by one of my teachers, Sheikh Saleh al-Usaymi, hafidhullah ta'ala. he mentioned that there was a pious man, I think in Qasim, or possibly somewhere in Riyadh. He was very elderly, and he was known for his ibadah, and he was known for his piousness. Okay, and he was in a wheelchair, subhanallah. And recently, obviously, it's a desert. Riyadh, only until recently, it was a desert town. But there was a boom with the petrol. As soon as the petrol dollars came in, the economy rose. Skyscrapers and a lot of building and infrastructure began to build quite rapidly, and began to be built quite rapidly. So in the town, a large building was built. It's like it's a mini skyscraper, and it was all the buzz of the town. For those who have not, for us, it's like, well, okay, what's the deal? Yani? But for them, subhanallah, it was a big thing, subhanallah. Okay, and it was the buzz of the town. And so his son said, they were walking with him once, and he was in a wheelchair, and he had the shamagh. And they said, they said, oh father, look, there's the skyscraper that was recently built. This is the building, the tower that was recently built. This is what everyone's referring to and everyone's talking about. And you know what he did, subhanallah? Instead of looking, he lowered his head and he covered his face with the shamagh. The shamagh is the scarf that is the typical dress of the Hijazi region. He lowered his face and he covered his eyes with the shamagh, subhanallah. Why? Because he did not want the love of that to come into his heart. He did not want the love of that to come into his heart. So if we find that we have our temptations in certain things, then let us lower our gaze from that thing. Just for this month of Ramadan, let's focus it completely on Allah. It could be cars, right? It could be things that are mubah, things that are permissible. Let's remove ourselves from it slightly. Just for this month of Ramadan, let us, because subhanAllah, if we do it for 30 days, khalas, it takes 30 days to build a habit. It takes 30 days to build a habit. After that, the love of this thing will be removed and we can focus our being on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That being said, Imam Ibn Qayyim, he speaks about the benefits of lowering one gaze from that which is haram. From that which is haram. And he talks about this in his book, Rawdatul Muhibbin. And he mentions from the benefits of Ghadd al-Basar, of lowering the gaze, is that number one, light will enter into the heart. Okay, illumination, inwards illumination will enter into the heart, and this will be visible in the eyes, and it will be visible on the face and on the limbs. Just like the opposite of this, he says, is that allowing the gaze to roam free on that which is haram will inherit darkness. It will inherit darkness on the eyes, the face, the limbs, and everything. And this is why he mentions Allah, and he says Allah knows best, but this is why Allah in Surah An-Nur, after mentioning the verse, the command to lower the gaze for the believers, after this he mentions the verse which is known as the verse of light. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, that Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Subhanallah. So first Allah mentioned lowering the gaze for the believer men and women. Then after this, later on, he mentioned the verse of light. And likewise, he mentions that there is a hadith in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "An-nadhru sahmun masmum min siham iblis," that the gaze, the haram, forbidden gaze, it is a poison arrow from the arrows of Iblis, la'anahu Allah. فَمَنْ غَضَّ بَصَرُهُ عَنْ مَحَاسِنِ امْرَأَةٍ أَوْرَثَ اللَّهُ قَلْبَهُ نُورًا. And so whomsoever lowers his gaze from what he finds as a temptation for him, and the hadith mentioned temptation for women. Okay, so this is addressing the believer men, but likewise the same applies to our sisters as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place nur and light in his heart. A second benefit that Ibn Qayyim mentions is that إنه يورث صحة الفراسة فإنها من النور وثمراته. It enables firasa within a believer. And in the hadith, اتقوا فراسة المؤمن. Be fearful of the firasa of a believer. What is firasa? Okay, firasa is the ability to read into things. Okay, it could be body language. Okay, it could be intuition. Sometimes we know people we might know some pious people, subhanAllah, their intuition is usually very correct. Okay, they sense certain things from people, they can read into people. Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala had firasa. Imam Ibn Qayyim has a small treatise on firasa. He says here that lowering wrong gaze, it leads to inward illumination, and this illumination will then give rise to correctness in a person's firasa or intuition. And he mentions that this is from the fruits of light when it enters into the heart. He mentions a statement from Shuja' al-Kirmani. He said, من عمر ظاهره باتباع السنة وباطنه بدوام المراقبة وغض بصره عن المحارم كف نفسه عن الشهوات وأكل الحرام وأكل من الحلال لم تخطئ فراسته. He says, Shuja' al-Kirmani from the Salaf, he mentions that whoever strives his utmost to follow the zahir, to follow the apparent, okay, from the Sunnah, and likewise he beautifies his inward self with constant muraqabah, constant awareness that Allah is always watching him, Allah is always privy, and Allah sees all from him. Then, and he lowers his gaze from the haram, and he prevents his nafs from doing that which is haram, from our innate carnal desires or shahawat, and he strives to eat that which is halal. So he avoids haram rizq. He says his faras, his intuition will never be wrong. Will never be wrong, subhanAllah. And it was known that Shuja' al-Kirmani, this person, his faras was never wrong. Allahu Akbar. So he's talking again from experience. Third fa'idah that he mentions, تخليص القلب من ألم الحسرة. Allahu Akbar. He says that the heart, subhanAllah, whoever lowers their gaze from that which is haram, their heart, that psychological restraint, okay, that they find that psychological tightness and depression that a person experiences within their heart will be completely gone and removed from this person's being. فإن من أطلق نظره دامت حسرة, because a person who never lowers their gaze, his regret will be constant. His regret will always be constant and will remain. Subhanallah. فأضر شيء على القلب إرسال البصر, because the most harmful thing to a person's heart is to constantly look at that which is haram. فإنه يريه ما يشتد طلبه ولا صبر له عنه ولا وصول له إليه وذلك غاية علمه وعذابه. Subhanallah. He says that a person who never lowers his gaze from that which is haram, it causes his heart to want that thing, and a person cannot have patience upon this thing, and yet he knows he will never get that thing. And this, he said, is the pinnacle of pain. It is the pinnacle of psychological torture, psychological pain. Allahu musta'an. He then goes on and he mentions, and we'll conclude this part of Ghad al-Basr Ibn Qayyim from the book Rawdat al-Muhibbin. He mentions al-Fa'idah, says one of the other points, he says, أنه يسد عنه بابا من أبواب جهنم. And this is, subhanAllah, the most important part, ya ikhwah, is that it closes a door from the doors of the fire. It closes the doors from the doors of Jahannam. فإن النظر باب شهوة الحامل على مواقع, because looking at things leads one to another door, which is the door of the shahwa, of the desires, of the innate carnal desires. Okay? And therefore, this will then lead him onto committing an act of haram. So first it starts with a look. Okay? And in fact, in another place, Ibn Qayyim, he actually talks about that looks lead on to thoughts, and thoughts then lead on and give rise to actions. Okay, or the hem, or the desire to commit action, and this desire to commit action then gives rise to the action itself, and if it gives rise to the action itself, then a person is lost. And so lowering the gaze acts as a hijab towards this, and he then goes on to talk about the mafasid, or the harms of not lowering one's gaze. And he mentions, number one, a person's heart will be completely corrupted. Number two, the sweetness of iman will be forever lost in his heart. Number three, the sweetness of ibadah and khushu' will be forever removed from his acts of worship. Number four, his knowledge will be forgotten or will become very weak. Allahu musta'an. Number five, qaswatul qalb wa ghaflatu 'an al-akhirah. His heart will become unaware and will become hard. Okay, and he will be, subhanAllah, literally from the ghafilun, from those who are completely unaware of what is happening in the reality of life. And they will forget the akhirah. Darkness, he mentions. Number six, darkness. Number seven, depression and worry. Number eight, he mentions a door from the doors of shaitan will be open, and so shaitan will play with him however he decides fit. And he goes on to mention many other mafasid of not lowering one's gaze from the haram. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to lower our gaze. Al-Ghazali then goes on, coming back to the Ihya Ulum. He then goes on to say, Athani. So the second thing from restricting the limbs and the fast of the special people. حفظ اللسان عن الهذيان والكذب والغيبة والنميمة. Essentially preserving the tongue, okay, from lying, from backbiting, from carrying tales, from fuhsh and jafa and khusuma, from arguing, from ill speech, from swearing, and keeping one's tongue in check. وإلزامه السكوت, and keeping one's tongue from talking unnecessarily. And busying one's tongue, it says, وشغله بذكر الله, and busying oneself with remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reciting the Quran. فهذا صوم اللسان. He said this is the fast of the tongue. So we're refraining the tongue from haram and busying it with the mustahabbat, that which is recommended. He mentions a narration from Mujahid in which he said, Mujahid ibn Jabr, عن مجاهد قال خصلتان تفسدان الصيام الغيبة والكذب. Two things that corrupt a fast: backbiting and lying. Backbiting and lying. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he mentions the hadith of Nabi صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم said, hadith متفق عليه, إنما الصوم جنة, that fasting is a shield. And we spoke about this previously, that fasting is a shield. Fasting is a shield. فإذا كان أحدكم صائما فلا يرفث ولا يجهل. So if one of you is fasting, then let him not speak ill. Okay, let him not say that which is haram. Okay, وإن امرؤ قاتله وشاتمه فليقل إني صائم إني صائم. And if someone tries to fight him or swears at him, then let him say إني صائم. Let him remind himself and remind that person, if that person is a Muslim, that I am fasting, I am fasting. الثالث, the third point, كف السمع عن الإصغاء إلى كل مكروه. The fasting of the ears. So he's spoken about the gaze, he's spoken about the tongue, and now he's spoken about the ears. And essentially the fasting of the ears, brothers and sisters, is to prevent hearing or listening to, because hearing can only be prevented to a certain extent. Really, if a person is in the physical confines of a space and he has the ability to leave that space, then let him leave that space, and khalas, he's protecting his hearing. But listening is intense hearing. Okay, so if a person listens to something, he listens intently to that thing. So let him prevent and abstain his hearing from listening intently to that which is haram. That which is haram. And he mentions وَلِذَلِكَ سَوَّ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ بَيْنَ الْمُسْتَمِعِ وَآكِلِ السُّحْتِ, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ma'idah, he said سَمَّعُونَ لِلْكَذِبِ أَكَّالُونَ لِلسُّحْتِ. He describes the misguided people as those who listen to lies and eat haram. So here Allah linked, and the person who eats haram, that which is not haram, yani unlawful things, to the person who listens to haram, he equated between the two. سَمَّعُونَ الْكَذِبِ أَكَّالُونَ لِلسُّحْتِ. And he mentions that Allah Azza wa Jal also says, لولا ينهاهم الربانيون والأحبار عن قولهم الإثم وأكلهم السحت. He says, فالسكوت على الغيبة حرام. Essentially, brothers and sisters, for those of us, again, who have a fitna, some of us may have fitna in ghad al-basar, in lowering our gaze. Some of us may have a fitna in our tongue, what we say, what we speak, and if we backbite and so on, and tell lies and so on and so forth. Some of us may have a fitna in our hearing as well. It could be listening to haram things. Whatever the case may be, let us try to control it and abstain from it. Number 4, he says, كف بقية الجوارح عن الآثام. Number 4, he says, to prohibit the rest of the limbs from sinful things, from sinful actions. من اليد والرجل عن المكاره, from our hands and our feet, from that which is haram, from our stomachs, from consuming that which is doubtful, okay, in the time of iftar. فلا معنى للصوم. There is no, essentially, فلا معنى للصوم وهو الكف عن إطعام الحلال ثم إفطار الحلال. He says basically, what use is there from a person who fasts from haram things, but then he breaks his fast on haram things. So again, he's referring to our rizq, brothers and sisters. The rizq and the importance of halal, rizq halal, the importance of halal provisions, and distancing ourselves from anything that has shubha, anything that has a doubt in it. And this, for most brothers and sisters, this is the most hardest thing, because, you know, it isn't as simple as, oh, okay, this wealth is haram. For example, from drug dealing. Okay, a person sells drugs which are haram by consensus. Obviously, that doesn't need to be said. Yani, this wealth is haram. Yani. But there are other haram means of wealth as well, that for some reason we don't view it in the same shana'a or the same severity as haram. as haram wealth such as drugs, but likewise wealth that is from interest, okay? Wealth that is gained from haram means. It could be fraud, it could be whatever the case may be, right? That wealth will also be haram as well. So this needs to be called out, just as that is called out as well. فمثال هذا الصائم, or for example, those of us who have careers built on haram things, and our wealth, our salaries are paid from companies whose majority of what they do, listen to me very carefully, the majority of what they do is based on haram things, then likewise that wealth, there is a shubha, there is a doubt in it. I'm not saying it's haram wealth absolutely, because to be honest with you, this is a very complex issue. Really it's an issue of fatwa. Okay, a person's situation has to be looked at. Okay, but if a person has shubha and doubt in that wealth, then they should leave it, avoid it, move away from it. And if they leave something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah Jalla wa ala will grant them that which is better. And he says here, the example of this person, مثال هذا الصائم مثال من يبني قصرا ويهدم مصرا. It's like literally a person who builds a castle, but he's destroying a town. Okay, so in the midst of destruction, he has a castle there, but the rest of the whole city is destroyed. And he says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, كم من صائم ليس له من صومه إلا الجوع والعطش. How many fasting people have no benefit, are bereft from reward, and do not benefit from their fast except ju', hunger, and atash, and thirst. That's all they benefit. But as for the rest of the rewards, it is gone. It was said, interpreting this hadith, فَقِيلَ هُوَ الْفِطْرُ عَلَى الْحَرَامِ. It was said, interpreting this hadith, that it is to break one's fast in haram. وَقِيلَ هُوَ الَّذِي يُفْطِرُ عَلَى لُحُومِ النَّاسِ مِنْ غِيبَةٍ. And also said, a person who, whilst he is fasting, breaks his fast by backbiting the people. Of course, a person who backbites, his fast is not broken, but it's still haram to do. And it is magnified in the time for Ramadan, because Ramadan is a time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored. It is a time that Allah Jalla wa ala has honored. So likewise, the acts of ta'at, the acts of obedience and our worship towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned previously, is magnified in its reward. But likewise, the haram acts, sinful acts, are also magnified in their punishment and in their sin that they commit. It is magnified. It is magnified as well. He says the fifth condition, or the fifth way of perfecting this fast, the fast of the khusus, of the special people, أَلَّا يَسْتَكْثِرْ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ الْحَلَالِ وَقْتَ الْإِفْطَارِ, that a person does not consume more than he needs when breaking his fast, بِحَيْثِ يَمْتَلِئْ جَوْفَهُ, such that he literally becomes fully satiated. He says, فَمَا مِنْ وَعَاءٍ أَبْغَضُ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ مِنْ بَطْنٍ مَلِيءٍ مِنْ حَلَالٍ. He says that there is nothing, a vessel that is more hated. There's no vessel more hated in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than a stomach that is completely full to its brim from halal. وَكَيْفُ يُسْتَفَادُ مِنَ الصَّوْمِ, and how can he benefit from his fast? How can he render useless the shaitan, okay, and his shahwa, and lessen his shahwa and break his shahwa, if he says here, إِذَا تَدَارَكَ الصَّائِمِ عِنْدَ فِطْرِهِ مَا فَاتَهُ ضَحْوَةَ نَهَارِهِ. How could this be the case? How can a person break shaitan, break his shahwa, lower his shahwa down, lower his innate carnal desires down, if he makes up for all the food that he missed during the day, he makes up for it at iftar time. Allahumma musta'an. This is something that's mushahid, brothers and sisters. We see an iftar is supposed to be, Ramadan is a time not only to reduce our shahwa, our carnal innate desires, okay, and to reduce and to feel weakness, right? And he'll speak about the importance of feeling weakness, of feeling different from your normal self. But all of this is connected to the heart. But what we see nowadays are literally tables full of food, feasts, literally. More so than outside of Ramadan, yani khalas. In fact, for many of us, Ramadan is a time of food. Wallahi, it is a time of food. It is a time of different types of food that I made only in Ramadan. Nothing wrong with this in particular. But the problem is, for most of us, it becomes a time of feasting. And that then has knock-on consequences. It was said in the past, "Man akila kathiran shayba kathiran." Whoever eats a lot will drink a lot. Whoever drinks a lot, nama kathiran, he would sleep a lot. Because excessive food and drink causes a person to be sleepy. وَمَنْ نَامَ كَثِيرًا خَسِرَ كَثِيرًا. If a person sleeps a lot, he will lose out on a lot. How can a person stand in ibadah in the nights of Ramadan? Okay, and of course the nights of Ramadan, it is, especially in the last 10 nights, it is of course better to worship Allah in the night than in the day. How can a person stand in worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when his stomach is fully satiated, when it is full to the brim? It's impossible. Mustahil. Not only will he not have khushu', Allah musta'an, but he probably won't be able to stand at all, to be honest with you. Allah musta'an. طيب. And Ghazali, to be honest, he goes on and speaks about this. He even says at the end of فَيُؤْكَلُ مِنْ عَطِمِ فِيهِ مَالًا. He says that even, as I mentioned, in Ramadan, different types of food are eaten in Ramadan that are not eaten in the rest of the months. It's a month of, for many of us, we identify it as food, but the fa'idah, the benefit of fasting is lost. And he mentions وَمَعْلُوم, and it is known that the intent of fasting, al-khawa is to empty oneself, to empty one's vessel. وكسر الهوى, and to break the hawa, the desires. لتقوى النفس على التقوى. الله أكبر. So the nafs can be strengthened to fulfill the remit of taqwa. He mentions فروح الصوم وسره تضعيف القوى التي هي وسائل الشيطان. The spirit of fasting and the secret of fasting is to weaken one's strength that are from the wasa'il, the means of shaitan, that shaitan uses to bring us back to shurur. He says evil. وَلَنْ يَحْصُلَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا بِالْقَلِيلِ, إِلَّا بِالتَّقْلِيلِ, and this will not be achieved except by minimizing, by being a minimalist in what we consume in Ramadan. وهو أن يأكل أكلته التي كان يأكل كل ليلة, and that is to eat the standard meal, the standard food that he would eat outside of Ramadan, لو لم يصم, if he were not fasting. فأما إذا جمع ما كان يأكل ضحوة, however, if he combines that what he used to eat during the day with that which he used to eat at night time, and he brings it all, then he will not benefit from his fast. He says فلم ينتفع بصومه, he will not benefit from his fast at all. He says ومن الآداب أن لا يكثر النوم بالنهار حتى يحس بالجوع والعطش. He says from the adab of fasting as well, is that a person does not sleep excessively in the day. Okay, حتى يحس بالجوع, until he feels, or so he could feel hunger, the pangs of hunger and thirst as well. So brothers and sisters, it isn't that sometimes in fasting, subhanAllah, you find that when we fast, we try and make our situation, or we make our condition so idealistic that it isn't as we're fasting at all. Right? For many of us, we try to do absolutely nothing in the day. We try to, if we work, then we try to take days of work. And there's nothing wrong with doing this, if it means that we up our ibadah in the day. Okay? But for many of us, we do nothing. We do absolutely nothing. But we just try to reduce the effects of fasting so you don't feel thirsty and you don't feel hungry. But has it come to our mind that the Sharia wants you to feel hunger, that the Sharia wants you to feel thirst? Has it ever occurred to us that perhaps this is a maqsood from the Sharia when it comes to fasting, that the Sharia wants you to feel hungry and wants you to feel thirsty? So then it could lead to greater maqasid, greater, higher objectives of fasting. طيب? He says here, وَيَسْتَشْعِرْ ضَعْفَ الْقُوَّةِ, so the fasting person can feel the weakness that is innate within him, the weakness that he has as a human being, as an insan, and humble oneself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيَسْفُو عِنْدَ ذَلِكَ قَلْبُهُ, and so his heart will become purified when he feels like this. وَيَخِفُّ عَلَيْهِ تَهَجُّدُهُ وَأَوْرَادُهُ, and likewise his ibadat that he does will become easy for him to do this. فَعَسَى شَيْطَانٌ لَا يَحُومَ عَلَى قَلْبِهِ, and so it could be that shaitan would again not take over his heart and not drive him to do that which is haram. السادس, the sixth point, أن يكون قلبه بعد الإفطار معلقا مضطربا. Now the sixth point is that after, and this is amazing, subhanAllah, brothers and sisters. So he's spoken about 5 things, okay? The outward conditions of one's limbs and how it should be in a state of fasting. But now he'll speak about after one has broken one's fast. He says that his heart, after the fast has been broken, that it is in a uncertain, uneasy state. معلقا مضطربا. Literally, اضطراب is to be like this. It's neither here nor there. It's all over the place. Okay? Why? بين الخوف والرجاء, between fear and hope. Because why? He is not sure if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this fast from him or not. Allahu Akbar. إذ ليس يدري أيقبل صومه فهو من المقربين. It is not known, is this fast going to be accepted by Allah, so he will be of those whom Allah has drawn near, or would it be rejected? فهو من الممقوتين. It will be rejected from the lowly, despised ones. ولكن كذلك في آخر كل عبادة يفرغ منها. And this should be the state of everyone's heart from every act of ibadah that he does. You know, brothers and sisters, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Surah Ma'idah, a verse that when the Salaf would read, when the pious predecessors would read, many of them would cry uncontrollably and they would shiver to their core. And this ayah is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ, that Allah only accepts deeds from the muttaqeen, from those who have taqwa of Him Jalla wa ala. Meaning, if we are not from the muttaqoon, then our deeds will not be accepted by Allah. Validity of deeds according to fiqh, that's a different issue. You see, when the fuqaha speak about is a action valid, or the pillars or the conditions of an action, that is the outward validity of an action, yes, but whether an action is accepted or not is a different story, and that is with Allah. An action can be done in its most perfect form, but the person who's doing it inwardly has ishkarat, has problems, perhaps lack of sincerity, or something blocking this action from being accepted by Allah. It could be dhulm, it could be oppression that a person is doing, or whatever it may be, and it may not be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after our act of ibadat, we should always be in a state of uncertainty of whether or not this action will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is why the Salaf, subhanAllah, after Ramadan finished, for 6 months after Ramadan, they would invoke Allah. They would supplicate to Allah to accept their deeds in Ramadan. They would supplicate to Allah to accept their deeds in Ramadan. And after 6 months have passed, for the remaining 6 months before the next Ramadan, they would ask Allah to allow them to reach this Ramadan. So you're always in a state of khawf al-raja, in a state of fear of your action not being accepted. But likewise, you're in a state of raja and hopefulness that Allah has accepted your prayer, your acts of ibadat, your fasting as well. Then after this, he mentions a athar from al-Hasan al-Basri, that he passed by a group of people, وهم يضحكون, and they were laughing and whatnot. فقال, and he said to them, إن الله عز وجل جعل شهر رمضان مضمارا. He said to them, and of course al-Hasan al-Basri was from the Tabi'un, okay, from the foremost of the Tabi'un in wa'adh, in admonition, in advising, and really it's been said, subhanAllah, that the speech of his resembles the speech of the Anbiya as well, of Hasan al-Basri. He said that indeed Allah Azza wa Jal, He made the month of Ramadan a midmar. A midmar literally is like an arena, okay? An arena in which they race horses around. So it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the month of Ramadan like this for us, for His creation. يستبقون فيه لطاعته. They're continuously racing with one another in acts of obedience, acts of ta'ah, acts of worship towards Allah. فسبق قوم ففازوا وتخلف أقوام فخابوا. Certain people would win, certain people would be foremost in that race, others will fall behind, and others would lose. فالعجب كل العجب للضاحك اللاعب في اليوم الذي فاز فيه السابقون. So he says, looking at these people who are laughing, how strange is it, how ajib is it for the one who laughs and is chilling and laughing and playing in the same day that others have completely overtaken him, and from the faizun, or from those who are successful in this day. How strange is it that this is your situation? أما والله, he says, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لو كشف الغطاء لاشتغل المحسن بالإحسان والمسيء بإساءته. He says, يعني subhanallah, if we could see the situation, those who are doing good will continue to do good. And Allahumma salli, may Allah give us tawfiq. He says, وكان السرور المقبول يشغله على اللعب أو يشغله على اللعب يشغله على اللعب وحسرة المرود تسد عليه باب الضحك. يعني essentially, brothers and sisters, Hasan al-Basri is saying that this day, or the days of Ramadan, are days in which we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are days which others have completely overtaken others in a race, and others have fallen behind. And so all of us should try our best to race and to not be of those who have left behind. He says after this, in regards to صحة الصوم عند الفقهاء, the validity of actions according to the fuqaha, he says, فإن قلت, so al-Ghazali here is saying, he's addressing the reader, And he says, فإن قلت, if you say, فمن اقتصر على كف شهوة البطن والفرج وترك هذه المعاني فقد قال الفقهاء صومه صحيح. فما معنى الله أكبر. SubhanAllah, just يعني, so Ghazali is going to talk about what we just spoke about, which is, if a person says, okay, if a person does this, he prohibits his limbs, these 6 things that he's mentioned, from, in particular, the 5 things before the last that he's mentioned in terms of restricting his limbs from performing acts that are haram, is his sawm, is his fast now sahih, now valid? Okay, this is what the fuqaha say. So what does this mean then? So Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, fa'lam, he says, I know that the fuqaha of the zahir, the fuqaha, when he says zahir literally means apparent. He says the scholars of fiqh, of the zahir, meaning the standard fiqh that we have. So there's a distinction between what is apparent and what is inwards. Inwards relates to tazkiyah, subhanAllah. So there's scholars of the inward fiqh and the scholars of the outward fiqh as well. And this is something unique, isn't unique to Ghazali, by the way, brothers and sisters. But if you think that perhaps this is his tasawwuf, la, the ulama of Ahl Sunnah understand this. The early Salaf, those who are known as al-Arifuna billah, these were scholars of Tazkiyah, Junayd and many others. And even Shaykh al-Islam in his writings, and many of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah talk about the ulama of Allah, the ulama of the Sharia, and the ulama of the Amr of Allah, the affair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ulama of Allah and the ulama of his Amr. For example, Surah Sughra, which we recently went through. He says, know that the fuqaha of the apparent, يثبتون شروط الظاهر بأدلة. They mention conditions of the fiqh of the zahir, of the apparent fiqh, with evidences. He says, هي أضعف من هذه الأدلة التي أوردناها في هذه الشروط الباطنة لا سيما الغيب وأمثالها لكن ليس إلى فقهاء الظاهر من تكليفات إلا ما يتسر على عموم الغافلين المقبلين على الدنيا الدخول تحته. فأما علماء الآخرة فيعنون بالصحة القبول. The key point here, brothers and sisters, that he says here, as for the ulama of the akhirah, okay, then what they mean by when an action is correct, they mean by it إيش القبول, acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبالقبول الوصول للمقصود, and by acceptance meaning that they've achieved their aim in the first place. ويفهمون أن المقصود من الصوم الاقتداء بالملائكة, and they understand that the maqsood, the intention of fasting, is to be similar to the angels, in that the angels are in a state of continual abstinence, okay, from their desires and so on and so forth, بحسب الإمكان, as much as we are able to. SubhanAllah, so it's like we rise up, like we rise up from our situation as insan, and it's as if we're level with the malaika. It's as if we're level with the malaika, if not better. Because we are doing this out of our ikhtiyar, out of our own free will. But the malaika have no free will. فإنهم منزهون عن الشهوات. He says, والإنسان رتبته فوق رتبة البهائم. He mentions that man in his very nature is above the level of the baha'im, of livestock, of animals, of camels, of cows and sheep and so on and so forth. لقدرته بنور العقل على كسر شهوته, simply due to the faculties, the rational faculties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon him in order to render useless and to break his desires. ودون رتبة الملائكة استيلاء شهوات عليه, but yet they are less than the rank of the angels because their shahawat, the desires of man, has overcome them and can overcome them. وكونه مبتلى بمجاهدتها, and the fact that he is tested with going against his desires. So he's talking about man in general, mankind in general. فكل من انحمك فالشهوات انحط إلى أسفل السافلين, and whenever he delves into his shahawat, it lowers himself into أسفل السافلين, to the lowest of the lows. والتحق بغمار البهائم, and it's as if he has likened himself to animals and creatures now. You know, Allah says, أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل, that the disbelievers are like the baha'im. أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل, they're like cattle. بل هم أضل, rather they are more astray than this. وكلما قمع الشهوات ارتفع إلى أعلى عليين والتحق بأفق الملائكة. But whenever he destroys his desires, طيب, he will be admitted and his rank will be raised to the highest of the highs with the malaika, with the angels. And he mentions وَالْمَلَائِكَ مُقَرَّبُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. The malaika are those who are close, who have been brought close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِي يَقْتَدِي بِهِمْ وَيَتَشَبَّهُ بِأَخْلَاقِهِمْ يَقْرُبُ مِنَ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ بقربهم وليس القرب ثم بالمكان بل بالصفات. So he says here, the person who is similar to abstinence, complete involuntary abstinence, is like the rank of the angels, those who are brought close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not in place, but in terms of attributes and attributes. And as I said, it could be higher than that, the person who is pious and from them. And this is an issue for Aqidah, to be honest, which we'll speak about inshallah ta'ala in the Alamiya program. وإذا كان هذا سر الصوم عند أرباب الألباب وأصحاب القلوب فأي جدوى لتأخير أكله وجمع أكلتين عند الجنة. So all of this, he brings it back to what he mentioned, the point that he mentioned in the previous page, which is that really, if this is the secret of fasting, then what benefit is there in gorging oneself when one breaks one's fast? So he's still on the last point, subhanAllah. And what benefit is there of gorging oneself and satiating oneself when a person breaks his fast? Likewise, likewise, in the day whilst he is fasting, to voluntarily take part in everything that his nafs desires from the shahawat, from his innate carnal desires. وَلَوْ كَانَ لِمِثْلِهِ جَدْوَى فَأَيُّ مَعْنَى لِقَوْلِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And if there's any benefit and fa'idah, or benefit, maslaha to this, or manfa'a, then really, how do we understand the hadith in which the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, كَم مِّن صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ مِّن صَوْمِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعُ وَالْعَطْشِ. How many people fast, they benefit not from their fast except hunger and except thirst. So this was a brief overview, brothers and sisters, over the secrets, the inner dimensions of fasting, taken from the magnum opus of Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazzali. May Allah shower his mercy upon him. May Allah allow us to benefit from that which we have listened to and read. We'll take a short break, inshallah ta'ala, for 10 minutes and pray dhuhr. And we'll be back, inshallah, at 1:40 to carry on with this webinar in going through the book of fasting from the book Umdat al-Talib by Imam Mansur ibn Yunus al-Buhuti. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.